Hey guys, it's Brittany. So I'm going to do the next study today. We're going to do effects of homeopathic medicines on polysomnographic sleep of young adults with histories of coffee-related insomnia by Dr. Iris Bell et al. So if you don't know Dr. Iris Bell, she does a lot of homeopathy research. It's really interesting stuff. I highly recommend you look into some of her stuff. I'm going to be going through some more of her stuff in the coming weeks, months, what have you, because I really like her work. She's got really interesting ways of approaching homeopathic research. This study I'm going to go over today I think is really interesting because a lot of research I don't particularly love, only in that it's not for the homeopathic community. It's very much to convince people that the high dilutions have biological activity, which is fine. I think it's a great way to continue working on trying to convince people that this stuff is somewhat legit. But as a practitioner, it doesn't tell me anything if someone publishes a study that says, oh, people got better faster with homeopathic treatment and when they had an ear infection than, conventional or whatever. It's just not useful to me because, of course, homeopathy is a law of nature. It's not like, if you're prescribing a supplement, you have to research that supplement for every single indication, understand its biological action, and only then can you really apply it to any other or any potential indication. Same with a drug. You have to research the drug. You have to understand the biological action. You have to know what kinds of indications it works for and it doesn't work for, and you need all of these studies. I mean, drugs, when they hit the market, have thousands of studies sometimes on them, and that's what people need in order to prescribe them. In homeopathy, it's not the same at all. We have a law of nature. We know that everything's a big word, but most likely most things will improve with homeopathic treatment because it's a law of nature. So I don't need a study to tell me that homeopathy works for ear infections. Of course it works for ear infections. So that's why I don't particularly find a lot of research interesting, because a lot of people approach it that way. However, this study, what's really cool is not only do they have an objective measure that things changed when taking a homeopathic remedy, but we can also kind of use the information clinically. It's not super, super helpful clinically, but it's approaching something that I could use clinically and giving us new information about remedies at the same time. So let's get into the nitty-gritty. So this was published in Sleep Medicine in 2011, right? And as I said, it was by Dr. Iris Bell and others. All right, all of this is coming basically out of the University of Arizona, where Dr. Iris Bell is a researcher. So what they did in this study was that they screened 4,000 people who were in an introduction to psychology class, which from what I've heard, I was never in an introduction to psychology class because that never sounded fun when I was 18. But from what I hear, it's quite common in courses like that to have a requirement that you participate in research. So I'm going to guess this is kind of where they got these people, because they were required to do some sort of research, and so this was one potential way for them to get involved in research. So what they did was then they screened them whether or not they matched a couple of different personality scales. So here, and they screened them for cynical hostility or anxiety sensitivity. And they took people with above average scores in one or the other, but not both. So people who were either extremely cynically hostile or extremely anxious, and a history of coffee-induced insomnia. So out of 4,000 people, they also screened that they were relatively healthy. They had to not have any serious chronic conditions, not be on any medication on an ongoing basis. And so out of those 4,000 people they screened, they took 54. So it sounds like a small study, I mean, it is a relatively small study, 54 people. However, they are very highly curated 54 people. So, of course, the more people, the better you can see trends, but we also have very highly curated people in the study. So then what they did was, it was a month-long study. They hooked these people up to a polysomnographic recording equipment. And so that's like if you go to the doctor and you get a sleep study and they put the dots all over you and like the things, and you have to sleep in a isolated room, that kind of thing. It's the same idea. So, except that they took the equipment to these people's houses or dorm rooms or whatever. And so the technician would like hook them up to all of this stuff, and then leave. And they could then sleep in their own bed, and have relatively a normal-ish night hooked up to all this stuff. And then they would come in the morning and collect all the equipment. And what they did was they did 2 nights in a row over the course of a month. And I think it was like 4 times. So they did nights 1 and 2, 8 and 9, 15, 16, and 22, 23. So 1 and 2 was baseline. 8 and 9 was placebo. 15, 16 was baseline. 22, 23 was after taking a homeopathic remedy. So this way, with taking it nights 1 and 2, they got a baseline. And what they did was they took the average baseline across 1 and 2 and 15, 16. And that's because on nights 1 and 2, they might have still been getting used to the equipment. So they tried to control for the fact that people's readings on nights 1 and 2 might be less than accurate. And so they combined the information with 1 and 2 and 15, 16. So we have people's baselines. And then we have placebo first. And they did this because if let's say they gave half the people placebo, half the people homeopathic remedies on days 8 and 9, and then they gave the other half placebo and the other half a remedy on days 22 and 23, and tried to take a baseline in between. As we know, remedies don't necessarily stop acting like within 24 hours or a week or whatever. I mean, there are insane cases of people taking 1 dose of a remedy and then having a follow-up like a year later, and they've had change over the course of the year. That always makes me nervous. But that's an aside, just because I find it really hard. I can feel the heart palpitations already. To really be able to say our remedy is doing that change if we wait that long for a follow-up. But anyway, it happens in the profession. And so obviously then if they gave them an actual remedy on days 8 and 9 and then tried to take a baseline on 15, 16, the baseline would not be baseline necessarily. And I'm explaining all of this because it also means this was single blind at 8 and 9, because all of the people in the study, not the patients, not the subjects of the study, they didn't know if they were getting placebo or active, but everybody else knew everyone was getting placebo first, because everyone was getting placebo first. So in that sense, it was single blind. And then they took another baseline, and then they had days 22 and 23. They split the group into 2. Half the group got Nox Vomica and half the group got Coffea, coffee, homeopathic coffee. And that's why they asked about a history of coffee-induced insomnia and the cynical hostility, nux, and anxiety sensitivity, which is kind of both. But I think they're going after Coffea in that one. And because essentially what they're trying to do is they're trying to make sure that the population that they're studying is highly sensitive to the remedies that they are testing. They don't want people who are not going to respond to the drug in the study. Right? So then they got to look at the differences between what an EEG looked like in people who took Nox Vomica and people who took Coffea. The other measure that I didn't mention before is they did have some subjective measures in the study. They completed daily morning sleep diaries, and Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index scales, and profile of mood state scales before bedtime. Right, so they have a lot of objective stuff, but they also have a little bit of subjective. Now, what they found was that the remedies increased the polysomnographic total sleep time. So this is an objective measure of total sleep time, and NREM sleep, again objective, as well as awakenings and state changes. Changes in actigraphic and self-rated scale effects were not significant. So the subjective measures, the self-rated scale effects, were not significant. The actigraphic is a way of measuring light, I believe. So they measured when somebody turned off the light and then how long it took for them to fall asleep. And then they can measure sleep latency, essentially. So sleep latency was not changed significantly when they took the remedies. What was interesting, and I may talk about this, I guess, more in a later one, because so the point of this study was really just to determine whether or not the remedies changed the EEG and all the other stuff in the sleep study. And it did quite significantly. If they took both remedies together and looked at the total sleep time and NREM, their p-value was 0.001, less than 0.001. So quite significant, which is pretty cool. And it means that they had essentially a positive outcome, that they indeed, the remedies changed the EEG readings and such. The differences in who responded to Coffea and Vomica, they have in a different study. And when they parsed it out, so if they just looked at the people who took Vomica, they had changes in how many times they woke up during the night, sleep awakenings. But that was not true in Coffea. And the results were slightly less significant, but that is more in detail in another study. So something for us to do another day. So many studies, so little time. I mean, honestly, I feel like I could spend my entire life just reading research studies and I'd never ever be caught up. Yeah. But anyway, we'll just keep chipping away little by little. All right. So, really cool. Because we have this objective measure of change with our highly dilute remedies. I should say all of this was in a 30C potency, so well above Avogadro's number. And this is the kind of thing, so if somebody came to you clinically and had a sleep study, if you were considering Vomica or Coffea, you have a little bit of idea about what kinds of changes you would see in a sleep study in somebody who needed Coffea or somebody who needed Vomica. This is essentially approving in the sense that they are giving the remedy to healthy people who have a sensitivity to these remedies, indicated by the history of coffee-induced insomnia. So in that sense, I think it's a really, really cool study. So yeah, but more to come. Till next time. Bye.